This is Andy Tube, and this is my series of a full restoration of a Singer Model 404, and it's part 28. In part 28, I want to check the clearance, the thread clearance between the bobbin case and the positioning bracket spring, our bobbin case holder spring, the little finger here. So I've got my camera zoomed about as close as I can, and the theory of this is that the hook is going to grab the needle thread and bring it around and cast it off right about here, and that thread has to pass through this little area. As the needle's going back up, it wraps around the bobbin thread and forms the lock stitch. So this little gap here has to be big enough for the thread to go through. We don't want it to hesitate or get pinched, and the spring has to flex a wee bit too. So you actually set a clearance on both sides of the finger. On this side, between the finger and the kind of the edge of the corner of the bobbin case, and on the right side of the spring, between the spring and the bracket itself. And on both sides of that spring, Singer says the clearance should be between 0.012 and 0.014 inches. So I would normally take my feeler gauge and I would pull out the gauge or blade that is 0.013. Up here I'll split the distance, and I would put it right down in here gently between the case and the spring and see if it'll fit. Is it too small? Is it too big? But when I got looking at this, I see the gap here is huge. It's like a 0.30 or something on this side. And look, I can put this whole screwdriver in there easy compared to that blade. And on this side there is like 0 or maybe a 0.005 or something. So this really got moved around. And I remember the guy I bought it from had said his wife got a new machine because this bobbin area was, quote, all jacked up. And she'd get huge bird's nest of a thread in here, and it kept jamming up, so she was finished with the machine. So my guess is that on one of those big bird nests of threads that she yanked around hard enough that it moved this adjustment out of position. So the way that you adjust this is to loosen these two adjustment screws, and you can adjust the position between the bracket and the finger or the spring, because these two screws actually hold the spring to the rest of the bracket. And to adjust the clearance on the left side of the spring between it and the bobbin case, you use this eccentric stud as an adjustment. And to be able to turn that stud, that is the other set screw down here below the bed, if you saw some of my other videos. So I'm going to show you a couple slides, one of this area with some arrows and stuff, and then the other a picture of that set screw down below, so you'll know what it looks like if you need to make any adjustments like this. But normally you would come in and You want to set your tolerance so that the blade goes in and gently rubs on both sides of the blade without flexing the spring at all. If you don't feel it, if it's too loose, like look at that, you need to adjust it closer together. If getting your 0.013 or 0.014 in there, it pushes back against the spring and flexes it, then it's too narrow and you need to make it bigger. And the same theory on the right side of this. So take a look at these studs real quick. Okay, so I'm going to go down here and loosen that eccentric stud set screw so that I can make this adjustment up here, and I need to loosen these two adjustment screws. So let me do that. And when you do your measurements with the feeler gauge, just take your time. You don't want to adjust anything that you don't have to. That's one of the main things about this. That one's loose. Let me get the other one loose here. But this is just so way out of whack. So if your tolerances are too narrow, your thread's going to hang up and kind of fall behind the rhythm. You know, the hook will come around, drop the thread. Well, the hook keeps going. It's going to grab the next thread loop and come here. And if the first one is still in the process of clearing through or hung up here, it's just going to start stacking them up and jamming everything. If your tolerances are too wide, if the gap is too big, the bobbin case is going to rock too much. Like, as the thread pulls around, the bobbin case moves and kind of goes back and forth a little bit. The thread coming around pulls it towards the bracket, and then when it releases, it goes back. So a little bit of this is okay. But if the gap is too big, boy, that thing really starts snapping back and forth, and it's loud. It sews a lot louder, and if the gap's big enough like this, it can even start jumping a little bit, and nobody wants a jumping bobbin. So we're going to adjust it up a little bit here. So the first thing, by loosening these screws, I'm going to take my 0.13 and put it in here, and now I've got a little gap in here. I couldn't get this in here before, so I have at least a 0.13 now. So let me get that in there and snug this up to it a little bit. Yeah, I'm still going to pull it back a little bit more because I don't want that spring to have to flex for me to fit that blade in there. If that spring has to flex, then it's not a true 0.013. And I'm just feeling a light drag on it. It doesn't wiggle back and forth, so I want to try and hold that in position while I tighten that back up. And then once I'll snug it up, and then if I'll retest the clearance, and if it's still good when I'm all done, I can make sure that they're nice and good and tight. So let me go back here now with my 0.013 and slide it in there. Yeah, it's got a nice little drag, but I can get it all the way in without flexing that spring. So I feel good that I have the factory setting on the right side of the spring. Now for the left side of the spring, now I'm going to come over here and see if that fixed my problem over here. Now see, it's still too much. Can you see how much that blade is wiggling, flopping around? So this gap is more than 0.013, and I'm not even going to bother to test 0.014 because it's just, I know it's big. It's like a 0.020 or something. So now I'm going to get in here and I'm going to turn this eccentric stud. Well, that's kind of I'm casting a shadow on there, but I'm hoping you'll be able to. Let me see if I can get my little guy in here. And it's not hard to turn because I've got the set screw off. So turning it to the right, to my right, pushes the spring finger towards the bobbin case, and turning it to my left, the screwdriver pulls it back. So can you see it kind of moving back and forth there? So it's an eccentric screw, so it's not round, and that's why it can move the spring closer and farther. So I'm going to move it away a little bit. I'm going to get my 0.013 in there, gently rest it in there, and start turning the eccentric stud to the right to move that spring left and get it in there. Now let me try that, because I started feeling pretty good drag. Okay, I'm feeling drag. Just let me make sure that I'm not flexing that spring. Yeah. So let me make it like too tight and show you what I mean by flexing the spring. I've got to kind of force it in there. Can you see that? Get it up. Maybe I'm hoping you can see that spring has to flex back. Too tight in there. See, and that's no good, because it's not, you know, I can get the blade in there, but I'm forcing it, so when the blade comes out, it's going to be less than the 0.013. So let me get it up in there again and kind of hold it straight, level and everything, and gently start closing that gap by turning the eccentric stud. Wiggle it a little bit, see if I'm feeling the drag. Yeah. Let's try this. Nope, it's still making that spring. I got it a little too tight. I had it perfect, but I changed it to show you. So let me go back a little bit. It's a little too loose. Okay, I'm feeling a drag on both sides, but I can go in and out with that blade without making the spring flex. I think that's good. Now see, the bobbin is still going to have flex, but I mean movement, the bobbin holder, but look, it's a lot smaller movement now than before, which makes sense because I've moved the gap from about a 0.030 down to a 0.013. You know, I think I'm just going to make that a little tiny bit more open, because I could see the spring finger flex ever so little bit. Now I still feel a light drag on this blade, but the spring doesn't have to flex at all to accommodate me. So I feel that's great. So I'm going to go down to the set screw for that eccentric stud and tighten it up nice and tight, so that that setting doesn't move. Then I'm going to come back and check my other side of the spring, the clearance there, to make sure that I still, yeah, see, I've got a little, I'm going to call it good. So I feel I have a 0.013 clearance on both sides of that spring. So I will finish tightening up these adjustment screws. And of course the real test is when I do the sew off. You know, then I can see how's my timing and how's the stitching, how does it look, how does everything perform. So that'll be the real test. But I don't even bother to do a sew off until I have the whole machine restored and set like this. And I'll tell you, there's plenty of times that when I do the sew off, everything's perfect, because to the best of my ability I set everything back to the factory settings. Occasionally I'll have to come in and tweak the upper thread tension a little bit, or tweak this a little bit. But I'm usually real pleased with the results. But we'll see how I did on this one. But that's the thread clearance. So you're way ahead of the game if you check your clearances, you know, while you're cleaning and restoring your machine. No matter what level of restoration you do, this is real important, because every single stitch goes through here. Every stitch you make goes through your upper tension and goes, you know, grab by the hook and come around. So the better you have that clean and set right, the better stitch performance you're going to have. And you know, you got the machine, I'm assuming, because you like to sew or you need to sew, and that's what you want to spend your time doing, is sewing and making your products and your creativity. You don't want to be hassled with you know, thread jams and all that kind of stuff. So if you take the time to do some of this ahead of time, you'll have a lot more time to sew and probably a lot more fun. So sorry my voice is a little dry. It's about 115 here in Phoenix, Arizona today, and the humidity right now is about 4%. So I just you can't keep your mouth anything but dry hardly. So thanks for tolerating that, and thanks for tuning in. I hope you picked up some good tips there. My little feeler gauge I bought at O'Reilly Auto Parts years ago. I think it was $6 or $8, and a while back I picked this guy up because I needed a different size. It has the same size blades as these others, but I needed a bigger blade thickness than this one could do. So this is my big guy. But I actually got it on a half off sale at what's that place, Harbor Freight. So I think it was $4. So anyway, it's a really they're a really good tool to have, and this can get out of adjustment again over the years, you know, so it's good for you to know how it works and how easy it is for you to set your tolerances and set your clearances. No big deal for the mechanical boss that you are with your machine. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you come back and watch another one. Take care.